We've learned about how abusers groom children and their gatekeepers. But this isn't the only conversation we need to have surrounding abuse awareness and prevention. It's hard to accept that there are adults who will hurt children. Sometimes it's even harder to grasp that there are children who victimize other children. This is known as peer-to-peer sexual abuse.
Let's take a moment to define peer sexual abuse. Sexually harmful behavior between children involving an aggressor child and a non-aggressor child who does not want the sexual interaction, and an imbalance of power of some kind. There are a number of imbalances of power, but the easiest imbalance to recognize is a difference in age, especially if the age difference is 3 or more years. Of course, age is not the only way to have an imbalance of power. It can also involve a child who is larger or physically intimidating, a difference in social status, where a child who's at the top of the social food chain requires certain actions of the child who's not at the top. An imbalance can come in the form of economic differences, involve a child with developmental or intellectual disability. So here are the facts. Nearly 1 in 3 reported cases of child sexual abuse in our society today is a peer sexual abuse case. That's a substantial number, and it's important to be able to give it the weight it deserves while seeking to differentiate these cases of abuse from situations that involve natural sexual curiosity. Kids are naturally curious about sexuality, and this is an appropriate formative and developmental stage. When children are engaging in sexual behavior, we need to redirect the behavior. But when we encounter adult sexual behaviors occurring between children, this is clearly a different category. It is also problematic in circumstances where a child is forcing behavior on another child who does not want or seek out that behavior. Where is peer sexual abuse more likely to occur? There is a higher risk during a program or in a place where clothes are changed or removed for any reason. Anytime clothes come off, there is a higher risk for peer sexual abuse. So programs that involve swimming, bathing, showering, or changing between activities have a much higher risk. The number 1 place for peer sexual abuse is the bathroom. Clothes come off and doors automatically close. Additionally, peer sexual abuse risk is higher in any location where a child can remain unseen. When an activity happens in a building, a room, or a playground where 1 or more children can remain out of sight, risk is heightened. There is also a higher risk when you have a situation where children are less closely supervised. This might be because of the physical location or the number of supervising eyes. So as a recap, these 3 areas, where clothes come off, any location that's less easily seen, and any activity less closely supervised. These are the locations of higher risk for peer sexual abuse, with bathrooms being number 1.
With these principles in mind, I want to tell you a story about a peer sexual abuse case that took place a few years back during a city-run summer camp. A 6-year-old boy came home from camp one day and began telling his mom about specific sex acts he took part in during the camp. Obviously, his parents were shocked and understandably upset. They wondered where on earth he could have even learned this behavior. They certainly never expected to feel such an egregious breach of trust with those who were charged with their child's safety and well-being. As an investigation took place, it was discovered that the day camp supervisors weren't aloof. They weren't disregarding their responsibilities or flippantly going about their day. They were dispersed across the playground and paying attention, yet they didn't catch the incident. It almost boggles the mind to think that something like this could happen right under their watch. But it can, and it did. 2 6-year-old boys and an 8-year-old boy had been able to conceal their behavior under a piece of playground equipment that was just large enough to hide them, but small enough to provide cover from those vantage points. It wasn't until another camper noticed what was going on and alerted one of the employees that staff members sprang into action. After law enforcement, the Department of Children and Families, and the Children's Advocacy Center came together, they determined where the inappropriate contact had originated. It was discovered that an 8-year-old boy at the camp taught them what to do. And this wasn't the first time they engaged in this contact. In fact, it is believed that it happened 8 to 10 times over the course of 3 weeks. As devastating as this story is, it's an all too common example of how prevalent peer-to-peer abuse is. and how these behaviors are learned and practiced. So this begs the question, how can we stop it? And for those answers, it really is about learning the warning signs.
Let's focus on some warning signs to watch for as we address this risk. On the aggressor side of the equation, here's what you're watching for. First, watch for a child who persists in physical contact when the other child objects, or the child who cannot leave his neighbor alone. Watch for the child who's physically aggressive with another child, or a child who doesn't respond to social cues or your redirection. It could be a child who doesn't tend to accept normal boundaries and may seem incapable of stopping certain sexualized behaviors like mimicking sexual interaction in some form, even after he or she's redirected. Sometimes the aggressor child seems to prefer the company of younger children, setting up interaction with younger children, creating secrecy, and introducing secret games, secret clubs, and secret locations. This is particularly concerning if the games involve touch. So these are the warning signs for the aggressor side of this equation. Now, as it relates to the non-aggressor, here are the warning signs to look for. This is a child who doesn't want to be alone with another child. They may not have objected to interacting with the other child in the past, but now they don't want to be alone with that child. It can be a circumstance where a child doesn't want to participate in an activity that he or she used to enjoy. So a sport or a school endeavor that the child participated in and seemed to enjoy, but no longer wants to participate in. It can be a child who's complaining of bullying behaviors. An interesting study looked at the inception of peer-to-peer sexual abuse cases and found an extraordinarily high percentage of peer sexual abuse starts with bullying behaviors. This could be physical bullying, maybe social bullying. So all bullying behaviors don't turn into sexual abuse, but a very high percentage of peer sexual abuse scenarios started with bullying behaviors. So watch for bullying behaviors. It's vital. Lastly, we need to talk about how we address the risk of peer sexual abuse in our programs and organizations. Often, the biggest hurdle that staff members and volunteers have to get over is understanding this risk is real and it happens with regularity. It's common. So we first need to let that reality sink in. And then we want to watch for the warning signs we talked about earlier, the warning signs for the aggressor and the warning signs for the non-aggressor. We have to be on the lookout for those brewing imbalances of power as they develop between children. Next, we address the risk of peer sexual abuse by ramping up supervision in areas of higher risk, which are the places we discussed earlier. Any place clothes come off for any purpose, any place where the activity is less easily supervised, and any place less easily seen. These are all places to ramp up supervision. We know the risk is higher in these places or in these activities. We've got to communicate effectively with other staff members who are involved. In other words, what the peer abuser relies on is a breakdown in communication between shifts or between personnel. So communicate about those brewing imbalances of power. Communicate any bullying behaviors witnessed between specific children. Communicating with other staff members and supervisors is an important element in addressing this risk. As Greg mentioned earlier, the number one location of peer sexual abuse in children's programming is the bathroom. So having defined bathroom policies in place is important, like not allowing children to go to the bathroom alone, or not allowing children of varying ages to utilize the same bathroom. Supervising the bathroom verbally, likewise important. This is not to suggest that you have adult staff members go in physically. Instead, verbally supervise the bathroom, stopping the door open with a doorstop and standing outside. These are the ways you can address peer sexual abuse risk in restrooms. With middle school and older children, the risk is higher in any overnight context, camps, retreats, lock-ins, and so forth. Overnight context creates peer sexual abuse risk and requires additional supervision and training. And any activity involving water, like swimming, increases the risk since what occurs under the surface of the water is less easy to see. So how do we address this risk? Awareness, training, and supervision are the keys. Let's revisit the playground situation that Georgia described. What would have changed that outcome? The program had staff members on hand. They were dispersed around the playground. Sadly, they didn't understand the reality of peer sexual abuse or what would likely occur. Training like this may have changed that outcome.